final session, day 3. How y'all feeling? You energized? You on fire? Yes. All right. Frederick Douglass. He said in one of his speeches, it's not light that we need, but fire. It's not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm. We need the whirlwind. We need the earthquake. And that's what we need right now. And when I think of that, I think back to every time I've seen these gentlemen speak, whether through poetry, art, giving y'all a lot to live up to, but I have no doubt you will blow the roof off this place. I think of Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali and Reverend Lennox Yearwood. Y'all got to see him, Reverend Yearwood, speak in our Underwater Projects film just yesterday, part of the Hip Hop Caucus, promoting civic engagement, environmental justice, economic justice. He is doing the work on the ground, telling stories and lifting up communities. Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, one of our T&B OGs. We always try to find a way to include you all in our conference because you have made it what it is. One of the first times I heard him speak was at Fairfax NAACP in my time there, and it was virtual because it was COVID. And the power and the art and the inspiration from those words was not diminished by Zoom. And last January, it was last January, Environmental Film Festival, they were premiering Ain't Your Mama's Heat Wave. And the two of them spoke. And I said, oh my gosh, I gotta get them here for Taking Nature Black. So I rushed up. Reverend Yearwood had already had to leave for something else, but I was like, oh, Mustafa, I'm Lydia. You don't know me. But y'all should come back, Taking Nature Black, be a part. And we have been so thankful to have them here today to talk about, again, harnessing the power of storytelling and art and using that to activate everyone for environmental justice. So without further ado, I pass it over to Reverend Yearwood and Dr. Mustafa Ali. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's good to see everyone. I apologize for my voice. I'll do the best that I can. But it's an honor to hold space with you, and it's always an honor to be able to be next to my brother. We've known each other for a long time. We were not going to say how long. We go way back to playing basketball against each other. That's how long we've known each other.
And I was winning, let's make sure.
He always tells that tale, He was a good basketball player, Ro. There's no doubt about that. But he was also a strategist on the court, and he utilized the people around him. And I used to watch how he pulled the best out of people. And he's continued to do that over the years with the creation. You did it even before the Hip Hop Caucus, but during the Hip Hop Caucus, I really saw how you maximized and made people understand the blessings that they had, the talent that they had. And how we have power. I always talk about my grandmother, and she says you have power unless you give it away. And we have far too many people who do that. So we're going to just have a conversation like we always do. Yeah. Let me let you chime in real quick, Ray.
No. I mean, I think this is a time for, as you would say, real talk. Mm-hmm. We're in a real talk moment. Want to definitely say I see some amazing good friends in the audience. So it's good to see so many of our good friends here at this time. I want to, since you mentioned sports, definitely want to mention my son graduated last year from Paul Smith's College. It's in the Adirondacks, which is one of the most beautiful places you can be and visit. I bring that up because today, on my way here, my son was put on a team here in America. He's a longtime Washington Capitals fan, but he got put on for the Boston Bruins. But he selected, yeah, that's what's up. But he selected to play, he wanted some money, which is, I'm not arguing with that at all. And so then he decided to go overseas and play. He's overseas now in Estonia and Finland. So, and I bring that up because somebody from NHL.com is talking about how he is doing as a person of color, as a black man, about 30 miles from Russia, playing in Estonia. And I lead with that because the thing that's important is that we as a movement will find out the best of ourselves when we get out of our comfort zones. And so I just start with that because I think this moment that we're in is a moment where it may seem like it's very difficult. And there's obviously a lot going on. When I was coming over, I love the sense of humor of a lot of folks in DC. I passed by a deli, and the sign outside the deli, Mustafa, had said that, it said Trump sandwich. And I was laughing because on the billboard for the sandwich, it says Trump sandwich, 2 pieces of white bread, full of bologna, with Russian dressing and a small pickle. So I just was like,
What was that last part?
it had a small pickle. And I was like, one, I don't want no sandwich like that, but hold the pickle. You know what I mean? So I think that we have to have humor in this time to get through these moments. So I'm just glad to be here.
Oh, I feel you on that. James Baldwin once said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Often, the folks who are in this room tonight have not been seen, even though we've been doing the work for decades upon decades upon decades upon decades. And we also often, artistry has not been honored in this space to truly be able to not only heal communities, but also to put a spotlight on the changes that need to happen and the work that was going on. Rev, let's talk a little bit about artistry, because for me, it is one of those critical elements. The civil rights movement, the AIM movement, the Chicano movement, a number of movements understood the value of that. But in totality, the environmental movement had not truly embraced it. I think until the Hip Hop Caucus and maybe a couple of others began to show folks the power that exists inside of that space. Can you talk a little bit about artistry and how it helps us to achieve the goals we have in front of us?
No, most definitely. So I always like to lead with this amazing quote from Tony K. Bombard, because I think that sets the framework, particularly for artists. If there's artists in the room, Tony K. Bombard's quote is, "The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible." So I think that's just the premise of this. Let me get to where we are as a movement. I think this is actually very important. We are obviously in a climate crisis. Without a doubt. We are seeing, at the Hip Hop Caucus, we have an office here in DC, and we have an office in LA. And our office was not directly impacted by the LA fires, but it was impacted because that is now our community. And so we are keeping those people in prayer, particularly the Altadena, a predominantly Black and brown and community, as well as all of the other people who were suffering. But it wasn't just that. Obviously, I can go on. Asheville, North Carolina is literally no longer here from Hurricane Helene. We had Hurricane Milton. We had weathers in Phoenix. I saw a young brother coming in here from Seattle, dealt with tremendous both heat and rain and droughts, all in that aspect. We have so many different things going on in India, obviously on the continent. You can go on and on. We are in a climate crisis. So that isn't really the conversation, Mustafa. We know that. The conversation for the movement, for you, is not that we're in a climate crisis, but as a movement, we're also in a crisis of imagination. And that is where we're finding ourselves, because climate is no longer being discussed as an issue of science and data and research. We are literally, climate is now front and center in the middle of a cultural war. And when you are in the middle of a cultural war, you think that you can just tell the truth, or you can just give data and research. That's how we're framed as a movement. But a cultural war means you have to tell stories. Stories are actually more important than facts. We can talk about the facts of they want plastic straws and what that does, and you can debate the merits of plastic. You can say that, well, in plastic, we consume a credit card size worth of plastic every day, or in plastic, we have it in the placenta, or we have it now in our brains. You can go through all that, but that won't move if that's not the story that moves. As a matter of fact, on the other side, there also, Joe Rogan, of all people, is having conversations about plastic. And we need to then figure out how those stories match up. Now, their stories are different. I'm originally from Louisiana, born right outside of Cancer Alley. So I am doing everything I can to stop petrochemical facilities. But in that process, and plastics, but in that conversation, Joe Rogan is having a conversation. It's different. It's very, very different. Their conversation, for some reason, with the manosphere, Mustafa, they are caught up in the situation where the study says that plastic, and we can ask Dr. Sokobi over here, Wilson over here, we can ask to make sure this is a fact, but they're caught up that plastic reduces the sperm count, and somehow plastic makes men's junk smaller. So that's their thing. I don't know why I guess they got the small pickle thing too, but for some reason, these predominantly white men are caught up on plastic making their junk smaller. Brothers ain't too worried about that. I ain't just going. That was another. Y'all probably get that joke, but that's okay.
I'm gonna drink some tea on that. Go ahead.
Yeah. But in the process, if that's how we need to connect, though, and tell stories to broaden the movement, to break the backs of the philosophy industry from creating separation, we do that. So one of the things we're doing now is that we're doing everything we can to tell stories. But this is the thing, our NGOs, our climate movement is not set up to tell stories. So then how do you deal with the moment as a cultural war and you're set up, you're not to tell stories? You don't have storytelling energy, you have white paper energy. So then how do you then transition from a white paper energy to a culture and storytelling energy for the moment you're in? And that means we have to then change, one, how we're funding and resourcing our movements. One, I think we need to fund storytelling and culture, which you're trying to do. Two, I think, and this is where I was telling the jokes because I know I was going to get a little heavy on some of this stuff. Two, I believe this movement has been funding the wrong people along the way. And I say that now as a funder. One of my jobs is to be the senior advisor at Bloomberg Philanthropies. And I'm there all day. Thankfully, they're doing some of this now, but we have looked at studies before this moment that we're in now in which $1.3 billion that was distributed to groups that came from 12 foundations, only 1.3% of that went to EJ-led organizations. So how are you going to have an entity that is on the front lines, that knows how to tell stories, that understands culture, only getting 1.3% of your money, forcing those entities to take from the government, the same government that is also hurting them, which puts them in a compromising position. So the minute you do change administrations, they are now in a position where they're lacking resources, not only from the organizations that should be funding them, but also from the same government that is killing them. And so when you have that situation, you then have a crisis of imagination.
There it is. Let's just ask a question by a show of hands, folks in the room. How many folks in the room need more resources to do the work that you know needs to be done? Raise your right hand. Just everybody look around the room. There's some people who did not. By a show of hands, you can put your hands down. By a show of hands, how many folks don't need any additional resources? So we have one person in the room. So what I'm going to ask you to, could you keep your hand up, please? So what I'm going to ask you to do is when this session is over, I want you to have a conversation with that brother to figure out what he is doing. And I'm in all seriousness.
Facts.
Because it's incredibly important for us to learn from each other. That's what community is about.
Yes.
Community is not about hoarding things. And intelligence and learn lessons is a part of that. That is a resource. So we want to be able to learn from folks who are being able to navigate this world. Why is that important? You know, there are all kinds of different quotes that are out there that talk to us about the moment that we find ourselves in. And we'll unpack that as we go forward. Rev, I want to transition to Artivist.
Okay.
Because the Hip Hop Caucus has been incredibly important, and others, and being able to build that. Last night, you know, since I've been laid up for a little while, I started to write when I was thinking about the work that you've done, Antonique Smith, Vic Mensa. I mean, I can go down, D1, all these amazing folks. Yes, please clap for them, because we often
please.
we don't clap for ourselves. Messiah, an amazing poet also. There's a laundry list of folks that Rev and myself have been able to be blessed to be able to hold space with. But I want to read this for you, and then I want us to unpack the power of Artivist. This is called the Artivist Call. I ain't never been good at swallowing silence, never been the type to let the wonder fester without at least humming a song to it, pressing a verse against the bruised blue of a country that swears it ain't broken while bleeding from its teeth. See, my people got lullabies for lynchings, got murals for martyrs, got stories carved in the bark of old trees while justice still ain't grown, but we water it anyway. Because what else is there to do when the newsreel reruns Black Death like a sitcom, when the city paints over our grief in gentrified pastels and tells us to call it progress? Nah, we ain't built for quiet. We ain't stitched for surrender. Give me a mic, a brush, a drum, a stage. I will baptize this country in the rage of its forgotten. I will spell freedom in the syllables of the unheard. I will pull beauty from the throat of the beast and call it resistance. Because we ain't just artists. We are the griots of grief, the prophets of possibility, the architects of a world where our children won't have to sing eulogies disguised as freedom songs. So we paint, we write, we march, we make, until justice ain't a whisper, but a symphony.
Come on. Come on.
So that's the Artivist Call. But Rev, let's unpack artivism for folks who may not be familiar and the power that exists inside of it.
So the word artivist and artivism is obviously a combination of two words. It's activists and artists put together. It's a unique breed of people. You just heard and saw one in Mustafa Ali in his poetry. So he combines both his activism with what he has flourished in amazing ways, my brother, his poetry. And so he then combines those two things to then connect the dots. So the artivists in our community, all of our communities, particularly Black, brown, indigenous, queer, young people, has been those who want to tell the story and articulate it. So we've seen from Eartha Kitt to Nina Simone to Harry Belafonte to Dick Gregory right here in DC. And so the thing, though, that's important about the artists and is that artists have this both blessing and cursing. The blessing is that they can do what you just heard. They can do poetry, they can sing, they can dance, they can do things. The cursing for artists that's different than us who are just solely activists is that in these moments, the Almighty somehow allows for artists to hear the screams of the people. And that haunts artists. And they then have to then put down what they're hearing and feeling into lyrics or music. Or they'll go crazy, literally go crazy. And they are not equipped sometimes to go through all of the chicanery that we sometimes go through in our organizations. They are not equipped to go through the belittling or marginalizing in the movement. They're not equipped to watch us create, in some cases, trauma porn to satisfy our own interests of watching Black and brown bodies be demised. They have to tell the story of what's happening. And so that powerful ability they have then gets put into motion through their art, their poetry, their dance. And so where we are now is that we need art. We need artists to then move forward. So you mentioned one person there, Antonique Smith, who was very close to Hip Hop Caucus. She is amazing because not only is she an artivist, but she was just named the 2025 Ambassador for Earth Day. Yeah. And she started her own climate organization called Climate Revival. And where she's going, yeah, please check out Climate Revival. Yeah. And you can see what she's doing in that regard. But I think it's the thing, though. The thing that I would hope, kind of back to organizations, is that we need to ensure that artists are being funded to do this work. Let me say this. I'm not sure we're coming to. I don't have an internal clock of our time, but I want to tell a story of where we are, so we have some time to get this in. And so, Mustafa, I think you might have heard this story, but so this is why it's important for artists and for us to tell stories. So I met a young brother over there. Where's brother at? Where you had brother from Seattle?
Javon.
Is he still in the corner there? Did he leave? I'm not sure. Okay. Well, tell me he got his shout out. So you know what I mean? You can't go on home and meet your shout out.
Let's do this real quick. Everybody say Javon on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Javon!
All right, we'll make sure his name is in the universe.
So he gets in there. So he gonna come in here and be like, what in the world's going on in there? Call my name. So I bring him up because there is a young brother like I went to speak at an Earth event in where Sean Bell, I don't know if you know who Sean Bell was killed in New York. On his wedding night, he went to a club and then the police mistook him, what happens a lot in our communities. And on the night before he was supposed to get married, he was shot over 50 times and killed. It was devastating. So anyway, that's the community I'm in. So in that community, I'm talking about about the climate crisis and all that stuff. And so this young brother, about 11 or 12, comes up to me. And he says, man, Rev, oh my goodness, I loved your speech. Oh man, that was fantastic. Now I should have known he was setting me up. The young brother at 11, 12 tell you doing a great speech. Should have known he was setting me up. But he said, man, I love you. I love your speech. I said, oh, man. I'm like, oh, thank you, brother. I mean, I appreciate that. Okay, yeah, I get you. Thank you. He said, but can I ask you a question, though? And I said, yeah, go ahead. I should have known the setup was coming. I said, yeah, go ahead. But his question shook me to the core, and I'm passing this question on to you. His question was, so I have a question for you. I said, go ahead, brother. He says, I know you love the planet and you're an environmentalist. I said, brother, go ask your question. He says, why do you want to save hell so bad? Why do you want to save hell so bad? And I thought about that. Because even if we solve and get clean air and clean water and stop the sea level rise, the people who we need the artifice to make plain are still in hell. Even if we in this room here in Silver Spring, there's still hell in Silver Spring. There's hell in D.C. There's a lot of hell in D.C.
All right now.
And I realized in that question of the genius outside the academy, the genius of these young people who we need to be voices like Fannie Lou Hamer in the 21st century. That genius is questioning all of us to stop doing what we've been doing. The poetry, the music is asking us a question. Why are you trying to save hell so bad? Why are you complicit with this madness, knowing it's bringing us to why are you dealing? Do you really need your big green job so bad? Do you really need to get that grant so bad that you're willing to see me live in hell? Are you willing to pontificate about clean air and clean water? Are you missing and I just want to keep it a buck, because I'm going to keep it a buck. When you have your conferences, are you more interested in performances? Do you just want to make theater? And I'm being clear, because I'm in D.C. with members of Congress. Are you just trying to get on stage when my people die? I done been to your conference. And sometimes your Congressional Black Caucus is more like the corporate Black Caucus. Are you here just to run around your conference and not do stuff that's right for your people? Or do you hear our screams? Why do you want to save hell so bad? Is all you want to do is make your LinkedIn and your resume better? You just want to get on top? Is that what your goal is? Or are you understanding that your people are dying in the streets? They're dying because it's too hot, and the grandma is dying because it's too hot. Your babies are dying because of asthma and emphysema. People are cooking literally on the streets of Phoenix, Arizona. People are being burned. Why do you want to say, are you just so quiet? Because you comfortable? So I just come to you today that we're in a moment where it looks like we're trying to save hell. But the role of the movement should be trying to save hope. That's what this is about. And artists are needed through their lyrics, their poetry, their music, their genre to save hope, because our folks ain't got hope right now. They losing hope day after day. And the other side, whose business plan means a death sentence for our communities, is breaking the backs. So this is that moment. This is why we need artists. We need poets. We need musicians. And we need you to simply save hope.
Yeah. So I know we're a little short on time. There's a quote that says that a system cannot fail those it was never meant to protect. Right. And when we think about, and I don't want to get political because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, when there is any administration that attacks environmental racism, attacks environmental injustice, tries to dismantle that, there is intentionality in those moves. And we know that if you can weaken what's happening inside of our communities or continue to weaken, it goes to what the young man had shared with you about the hell that so many people are living in. Right. We have a responsibility to be the storytellers, as Rev has been sharing with us here today. We have to make sure that people understand that, yes, we are environmentalists, but we are also focused on justice. Because we got more people dying from air pollution in our communities than are dying at the hands of police. And we know how serious that is. And more folks who are dying from gun violence, more folks who are dying from car crashes, who are dying from overdoses of drugs. If you ever listen to Dr. Wilson talk, he unpacks all this for folks. So in this moment, in our storytelling, we got to make sure that it resonates with the people who are actually dealing with the injustices that are happening. Rev, I want to do two things. I know we're short on time, but we're not short? Oh, well, shoot, we about to go then, right? Yeah, we was trying to be all proper for folks.
Oh, yeah.
15 minutes, we can do it. So,
do folks have questions?
Yeah.
15
minutes before
all right.
questions. Okay. So let's unpack some of this for folks, because even though we talk about the impacts that are happening inside of our communities, we also understand the beauty, the treasures that exist inside of our community, and I want to start from the roots and build up from there. Yep. So we understand that when we are talking about environmental justice and the movement, we are talking about a matriarchal movement that also has a number of men, of course, who have played an important role, but often the sisters don't get the attention for all that they poured into the work in our communities. Yep. Let's talk a little bit about how do we make sure that platforms are there, opportunities are there, so that the folks who are actually doing the work have the opportunity to also lead us toward our North Star.
Yeah, no, well, I guess we're about to go there. I guess it's going to be what it's going to be. So I said before, I believe that to win on climate, we have to have imagination. We also have a leaderful movement that is run by particularly women of color, young people, the queer community, and folks who are engaging using culture. I think that is the way to win on climate. But with that, we have a movement that has not understood that and repelled against that. The environmental movement, which is different from the conservation movement, was predominantly started and created between 1968 and 1972. Obviously, you have the conservation, you have groups like NWF and Sierra Club that obviously started way before that. But you have the environmental movement, the bulk of it. The groups that were created was between 1968 and 1972. So you have like League of Conservation Voters, you have Earth Justice, you have Aspen, you have NRDC. So most of these groups were created during that time frame. And during that time frame, a number of things were happening. Obviously, Dr. King had just been assassinated in 1968. You have a powerful American Indian movement, AIM. You have a powerful queer movement that is happening throughout the country. You have a powerful womanist and feminist movement that's happening. And you have an anti-war movement all going on during this time frame. It's important to know that at that time, the climate movement between 1968 and 1972, which we would then have the first Earth Day, obviously with Dennis Hayes and Gaylord Nelson, will create that. This is the 55th year Earth Day. but also the EPA would be created during that time frame, the Environmental Protection Agency, which was created under Richard Nixon, who wasn't any green champion, and it's funny how far we've fallen from having Republicans in that position. But I bring this up because during that time frame, the environmental movement makes a decision that we are still dealing with. It makes a decision that to operate, they have enough resources to create a siloed, segregated environmental movement. They do not create an intersectional environmental movement. And so they do not understand the importance of the Black Power movement, the women's movement, the anti-violent, the anti-war movement, the American Indian movement, or the queer rights movement. And they begin to silo themselves immediately from that time frame. When the environmental justice movement begins to come into the scenes, already here, it just becomes to be more organized. When that movement comes in there from North Carolina and from Texas, and you begin to have scholars like Dr. Bullard and Dr. Wright, and you have Dr. Ben Chavis and Peggy Shepard and many, 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 many others. When that movement comes in place, it would make sense that that movement would join in and have the power to move forward. There was an instance in which that movement was then put to the kiddie table, I would say, of the environmental movement. And that would continue through today. It wouldn't be until literally till the Markey Waxman bill would come about. And when that would fall in destruction, that movement would then look to seeing how it can broaden itself. Why is all of this important? Because when we get to Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act and Justice 40, we are correcting the wrongs of the movement that takes place between 1968 and 1972. And in correcting those things, we are in this position where we are now trying to bring together a movement, but not respecting what needs to be done in that aspect. So where we are now is that we now have an environmental justice movement that has been bastardized and moved to the margins of this movement without funding, without support, without the genius that's there. And you have a movement inside that is still steeped in white supremacy, not honoring the history and those who have been doing this work and giving nickels and dimes in a way to have them do what they do in blood, sweat, and tears. And you have a movement now that in the crisis of the moment is still doing that. How do we fix that? The only way to fix that is by now going back, apologizing to environmental justice organizations, saying that we understood that we took away your genius. We consolidated your work. We did not have you and respect what you were doing. We caused you harm. We belittled you in conferences. We made you go through the back door and not be honored the way we should have. And on top of that, we need to then go back and create endowments for environmental justice organizations. We need to now share the resources. So while we still have our $80 million or $100 million budgets, we need to go out here and ensure you have the resources and infrastructure to do the work you need to do that you should have been doing for 40 plus years. That is the way. And if we can do that, we can shake up this movement and become a true, powerful, intersectional movement that is led through the lens of environmental justice.
Yeah. So I think we have a little more time. I got a couple of things I want to unpack. So Rev, let's talk about what we find ourselves in this moment. With what you just shared, it seems like, and I hope that I'm incorrect in the statement I'm about to say, that we are resegregating the environmental movement.
Yes.
Unpack that.
So the reality is that the places where the fossil fuel industry is. And it's unfortunate too, because it's not just in black and brown, it's also in poor white communities as well. So I think it's just, I don't want you to think it's not even just under the racial lines in that aspect, is that we're seeing that those who are most impacted on the front lines, those in Louisiana and Texas, those in Delaware, where DuPont plant, obviously cancer clusters, right here in Baltimore, they're obviously in New Jersey. We're seeing that in Ohio River Valley, we see that in Beaver County with the Shell Cracker plant. And so those who are at the front lines who are most harmed are not getting the resources. And what we are seeing then is that those communities, because of technology, because their voices are beginning to be heard, the movement, literally being afraid to lose their jobs and their comfort, is resegregating the movement in a way in which it is trying to put, and this is the hard part, and they're pitting organizations literally against themselves in a way to continue to control. They are not allowing them to actually get to funders, and they're keeping them out. So they're not only segregating it from a standpoint of just from a geographic standpoint, but they're also segregating it from a standpoint of resources. They're literally blocking them, going behind a lot of these organizations who are doing this work, and then telling the funders that they don't have the capacity to do this work. They don't have the resources. They don't have the staff. They can't do it. Give us the money, and then we'll redistribute that. We'll re-grant that money to them. And so we're seeing this kind of chicanery, this kind of thing that's harming. And the thing about that is that in this process, we have folks who are losing their lives. Folks we know, Cecil and others from WEAC, who literally are not taking care of themselves. And they're literally, their marriages are failing. They're not seeing their kids. Because the thing about Black, brown, indigenous, and queer people is that we will sometimes do this work and not get paid. That's our Achilles heel, and they know that. Other groups won't do it. They'll do the grant. They don't get the money. Well, we ain't gonna do it. And a lot of times, EJ groups will be like, damn, I put in a grant for $1 million. They gave me $10,000. So I gotta do it. And they then end up killing themselves to do the work. That is wrong. That is not right. That is not a movement. That is usatory. And so if we're truly calling ourselves a movement, that means it is not about charity, but about solidarity. And so the times need to change so that we break down those silos, we break down a movement that is segregated, and we come together as all of us, Black, white, brown, red, male, female, straight, gay, theist, atheist. We come together as a movement of humans at the most critical time that we're in and say, listen, let's redistribute this resources. You don't need to have an endowment like Yale University where you got $50 million in the bank and other groups ain't got $5,000 in the bank. Let's redistribute resources, and then we can actually take on this madness of the fossil fuel industry and actually win.
There it is. So I know we're short on time. And then they're going to come to the questions, right? Okay. So erasure. So we see erasure happening in lots of different ways, right? And I want to bring youth into this, right? So we know the amazing role that youth has played in the environmental justice movement, the climate justice movement, many of the justice movements from their inceptions. We also see, Dr. Wilson may have talked about it already, that there is an erasure of resources on the federal government side with real intentionality in that. And I believe a part of that is also being able to limit the amount of young people who can move into the space and make sure that they're being paid and learning and becoming, the next generation of change makers. So let's talk just a little bit about, in the work that you do and others, about how critical it is to make sure that we have young people in the mix and that their innovation and ingenuity is helping us to achieve the goals.
So one thing I would say, I was very blessed to be around Marcus Raskin, who was at the Institute for Policy Studies. That's Jamie, good for, some of y'all know, That's Jamie Raskin's father, He gave me this advice a long time ago, and I've taken it for Hip Hop Caucus. It's actually saved that organization in many cases. You remember? If you remember, I would say this. It was like,
I remember.
don't take government money for this very reason. I understand the needs to take it, to use it, to build up, but it could be very dangerous. I think we're seeing that now, and a lot of groups are taking a lot of money, and now they're in some dangerous situations. So that's one thing we have to be very mindful. Again, he who funds you is he who controls you, and so you need to be very, very careful about how you're and what you're getting those kind of resources. Also, you can get money to be silenced. And so you have to be very careful that if your people are dying and they're giving you a lot of money, but you're not allowed to then speak out about the death, you're in trouble. So for young people in a position right now, young people are in a very unique situation. I hate to say this, a lot of young people were used in this movement just to be young, to fit in a process. You weren't actually brought in to be leadership. Some of you are now taking that, and you need to do that. You've created organizations like Zero Hour and Young Black, Young Green and Gifted, and Sunrise Movement, and also and some of those had problems and different things that went on with that. I get it, but in that process, the thing that right now is that where you need to pivot quickly is that you still need to have wisdom, and it's not a bad thing, but when you're being put up front because when you're being put up front and you're a young person and you're not asked to bring your elders with you, you should be suspicious of that. And when they're just saying you just come and you come to the rally and they're not asking you to say, and you're not asked to bring, because I believe the Bible said there's safety in a multitude of counselors. And so I think that I just want to tell young people, so if that was a big problem, they would put you up, and they actually again isolated you from your wisdom, and they try to keep you away from that. So I think that moving forward, the money that we have now is very selective. I think that young people need to go out here, and also money was given not to help to build your community, so you get money from your community, but you just keep going back to a source who would then tell you what to do. So I think that young people definitely need to make sure in this moment to bring your wisdom, and have meetings that are not on TV or TikTok or Instagram. You need to be able to have conversations and listen and learn. My mentor was Dr. Dorothy Irene Height. I was very blessed to have that mentorship. Yeah, give it up. It'll be 15 years since she passed on April 20th next month will be 15 years. So it was a very deep hole for me. But she used to always say this, and I end with this. She would say this, and she took to me. My dad was the dean here at Howard University for African American Studies. And so that's how I got to meet a lot of different people in that role, and that shaped me. And so she took me in because obviously I was also raised by Dr. Beverly Wright. Dr. Beverly Wright raised me, and she always tells us how she changed it's very humbling. She changed my diapers, and I don't care how much you sparkle red. I change your diapers, But Dr. Height said this to me, and I say this to the young people and to all of you, really. Dr. Height said that the March on Washington, she said that Martin, as she would call him, Dr. Martin Luther King, Marty, and John, obviously John Lewis, she said that she was old enough to be their mother. She ran the National Council of Negro Women, one of the main groups. But they decided, Whitney Young and the rest of them, that no woman could speak, particularly no black women, could speak at the March on Washington. Joan Baez sang, others sang, and others with their Mahalia, they sang, but no woman spoke. And so I asked her, I said, Dr. Height, well, how did you feel about that? And she looked me dead in my eyes, and she says, that hurt me, because they did not allow me, but didn't allow no black woman to speak. And that hurt me. But she said, God allowed me to outlive them all. And now I'm here using this voice. And she says, sometimes you have to know when it's your season. And so for a lot of young people, your season may not even have happened yet, but you're being pushed out of your time in the wrong season. And you don't have the seasoning or the marinating yet, because your season may literally be when you're in your 80s. So don't let nobody rush you to know when your season really is. Thank y'all so much.
We're going to transition to questions. As we do that, I see Javon over here with his hand up. I just want to also bring Damu Smith, his spirit, into our room. He was one of my mentors, and if you are going to be an activist, then you need to be able to know who he was and to study how he was able to help the movement and to pull it together. So with that being said, I see a couple of hands. Aaron, if you don't mind, we're going to go to Javon and get that question, and we'll come straight to you.
So my question is...
If you could stand, brother, I want everybody to see who you are.
So my question is, how was the video yesterday important to you? And if you could choose anyone except Wanda Sykes to be on the video, who would it be?
Yeah, I know what projects is very important because for obvious reasons, I think using culture. Thank you for that question. Checks in the mail, too. That's a nice little plug Underwater Projects. It's a documentary that we did at Hip Hop Caucus. We've done a number of documentaries now that were at Sundance, different things. It's a great film about Norfolk. If you didn't see it, please go to Hip Hop Caucus and check it out. That and our other documentaries that we're doing. We have so many other things that we're doing as well. Who else I would have chose for, except Wanda Sykes. Wanda was great because she's obviously from Norfolk. So I think that, so that was an important piece to that. And also, when I work with artists, I've been very blessed to work with a lot of heavy hitters. So I get to then use my, I guess, gravitas to then to bypass their managers and to see if they real. You know, I get to talk to them because I also feel that I'm not, if I need a poet and I talk to Mustafa, he's gonna be real. I mean, okay, he's good, so I want him to do it. Some poets may just be doing it for a check, and that's cool, and you can get a check, but I also need you to be fighting for your people. So Wanda was all in to do that. Who else would I have chosen though? That's a great question. I think the other person from Norfolk or from that region, man, you know, I know he's got a lot of, he hasn't been on a good roll, but you know what I mean? I think I would like, because we actually talked about this for Ohio stuff, you know, Dave Chappelle, and yeah, because I think that the reason why Wanda was so good is her voice is so iconic. Because she's narrating, if you haven't seen it, she does like the animation. So his voice is iconic and would have fit. You would have, the minute you hear his voice, you would be like, you start laughing almost. So Wanda's the same way. I'm trying to think whose voice would have fit in that regard. But great question.
It is a good question. Could you stand up again? Could y'all give him a round of applause? Because I want to make sure we're uplifting our young people. And Javon, I want you to also remember, and I'm sure many of the other people in the room here, for us, for our communities, and everyone here is community, water is spiritual. And sometimes we forget the connection that exists between water on a spiritual level. So when people attack our communities in relationship to water, they are also attacking our spirituality. And that's just another reason why we have to work so diligently to be able to address the issues that are going on. Give him another round of applause. We're going to go to Aaron.
Well, first and foremost, brothers, it's always good to see my brothers in the struggle, in the battle. I would only raise my voice to quibble with a very important point because I want the community here to understand it in the context. As you know, I've old as dirt in this movement. But that said, if Jamie Raskin gave us the voice of be careful of government money or big foundation money, my advice, if in a vacuum, that's a very dangerous suggestion. And let me qualify with that why. If we look at this recent season, one of the highest periods in which the largest investment, Inflation Reduction Act, of revenue into the climate and green energies, even in the EJ space, we're talking billions of dollars. You never see that before. And it's not just our communities, a lot of communities had a spoon of that. Ours probably got maybe a teaspoon or a quarter of a teaspoon of it. So even though it was the largest, it still was the largest investment in EJ communities. The weakness is not the money or the source. The weakness goes into the struggle, the movement, and the ideological base of our people, and they're organized. And I would say the season that you look at, we have to think about not that a Democrat would be elected or somebody, nothing is guaranteed. I think our biggest mistake is assuming that it will be around tomorrow. And it's not just only the money. We're talking about the attack on even Brown v. Board of Education. This is a rollback on everything. So it just shows us whether it's money, policy, even the EJ executive order. It's a minute, but when we have that minute and we have that moment, and like Michael Jackson says, the mic is in my hand, I ain't giving it up. In that moment, the point is having us develop the strategies to be as impactful, but also even how do we start to save and plan for the next day. Don't assume that next year's funding cycle will be there. Don't assume that even Michael Bloomberg will back us. You know, they all have their agendas. I mean, we see one oligarch behind the current administration, and we have Bloomberg as an oligarch behind ours. The issue at the end of the day is how organized are we and how resilient are we in using those mercurial resources? Because at the end of the day, we do not have the wealth anchored in our community, but we do have the tactical analysis. So a lot of the young brother, which gives me hope for tomorrow, but even some of the scholars that I just learned about in being here. So I would just want to modify that and say when Raskin gives such a broad stroke piece of advice, the retort would be, then, we received, but the question or the challenge to us in spaces like this, take stock of this moment and how something can be fleeting and swept away, and how we must use our resources, assume that they're not going to be here tomorrow, but be able to be tactically resilient and have the revenue resources to plan for tomorrow and the drought. Assume the drought or the fire is coming every day,
So let me actually, that's a great question. So let me say, make sure, I know you meant this, not Jamie, was Marcus, was his dad. But in that, that's actually a great point to dig into, because I think we always need to have real talk. So I agree with you. The drought conversation never took place during the IRA. So it wasn't like when we were actually crafting that bill, which I'm all for. I'm with how that evolved. Obviously, would have loved more the Green New Deal that went to Build Back Better, that then got Manchin, who then brought it down. And actually, it's funny, and some actually, we're glad it was Manchin, because that's the reason they're having a hard time now getting rid of that bill, because of Inflation Reduction. It served actually their communities. That's why it ain't on the chopping block. The point that I think that is there, that Mark Raskin was making, is that be careful, do not take government money, is because of two things. One, if you're going to take it, make sure you have a plan, right? And a plan that begins to use that money to then build a reserve for other money. Two, if you need to begin to build money from your base and not just look for the government money to take care of your base, because then your base won't actually know you're actually serving them, which is why now Lee Zeldin can say there's 20, which is erroneous, but why he can say there's $20 billion of gold bars being thrown off of the end of the ship. He can say that because the communities don't know that actually that's not how that works. but he's attacking that through story and through propaganda. But in that, the reason why this is all important is because I do think that, and we will have another stab at it. So this is, to your point, is this, that once that happens, and we need to have conversations now that says that when we're distributing resources, that let's also make sure they're being distributed in a fair way. But let's talk about the private dollars, because you mentioned, because I work with Mike Bloomberg. I'm his senior advisor, so, and and that's important from a standpoint that we need to be in the room. I'm a big proponent of the spook who sat by the door. So I think it's important to be in these places to share wisdom. Let's talk about that. So these foundations are shifting, right? They're not giving money out. And in that process, there is a crabs in a barrel mentality that's being happened, in which large organizations are pushing out EJ organizations from those resources. And the thing that I'm saying here is that money, particularly private money, during the time of famine, and I use the biblical, I don't think I say anything kind of biblical. I said 1, 2 scriptures, but this is it. I do think that we need to have a Joseph mentality in the midst of the famine, so that if we are close to resources, that are we actually using that to talk to redistribute that? I know I talk to a lot of groups. I'm not even on their boards, mostly black and brown groups and indigenous groups, to help, and different groups, to help them to figure out how to navigate this. But it is a serious moment that some organizations are suffering while some organizations are closing their doors. And the fact that we're allowing organizations to so easily close their doors for what can be literally $2 or $3 million, that other groups can find that from not paying their consultants, that's what I'm talking about. That's the conversation we need to have at this moment, so that groups can make it through the storm.
I think we just need to add to this conversation. Brother, I think you're next. You know, we have to make sure that we're ensuring that the expertise exists inside of our organizations so that we can diversify our funding streams. That's one. When I first started doing this work, we had $3 million for environmental justice for the entire country. So why do I bring that into our conversation? A lot of folks are falling back right now and just allowing administrations, so I don't get anybody in trouble, to roll back on the debt that is due. Now, each and every community across our country, whether we're talking about folks in Institute, West Virginia, or in Cancer Alley, or we're talking about, folks in a number of different locations, are paying taxes. And those tax dollars should not be taken away to be able to address the impacts that are happening inside of their communities. So I agree with what Ref is saying also, and us being able to think critically about where we're getting money from and how it is distributed. And Aaron, I also hear you, because we have to stop allowing folks to take our money and utilize it in ways that in many instances are unhealthy and unhelpful for our communities. So we need to make sure that we got our eyes open and that we're engaging, whether it is through litigation or through a number of other tools that we have to hold people accountable. Because far too many people are falling back and just saying, well, this is just the way it's going to be, and that's not necessarily how it is. So
hold on, I just want to say this, because I know this time check, we have one probably. So I just want to say, I know we got like one more question. Unfortunately, I just want to say, I know I flew in, I was at the HBCU conference in New Orleans yesterday, and I flew in today, and then I got to fly back out tonight to go to Houston. So I'm looking at my assistant, Bree, over here. She says that I had to literally get into a car and go right back to the airport. So I won't be able to chop it up. So I just want to make sure that I don't want to be seen like I'm rude by just coming and leaving. I really want to say I really appreciate, y'all don't know, I see so many family and friends here, and it's so good to see them. I'm so glad that you're here. And many of you, I just want to let you know that you are literally the first responders to this madness. And so I just want to make sure that the rest of the country, sees what's going on in D.C. know many of you are going through a lot of hardship, and that you are in your role here. We're praying for you. I'm here too. I guess I live here, but but we're praying for all of us in this moment. So I just want to let y'all know that I know I got to speed out to get to the airport to go to Houston. But I just want to let y'all know that this conversation we're having now can't just end here. And so I'm hoping that the organizers and Mustafa and Dr. Wilson and Aaron and all of you, that you figure out a way, because we opened up this was a heavy conversation that opened up some things up that it can't just end in this room. So I'm hoping that the organizers of this meeting really figure out ways to reconvene some of these things that were discussed here. Thank you.
Brother, go ahead.
Peace. My name is Charles Johnson. I work for a nonprofit in Virginia, and my question comes with, I work with a lot of youth, and we lead a lot of MWE's, Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience, and stewardship is an important part of that. But a lot of our communities don't see stewardship or volunteering as something that they like to do. It's more of like a work aspect. And we do see a lot of energy from our privileged communities. So one thought is, how do we energize our youth to give back to our environment?
I mean, there are a number of ways for us to do it. I mean, I think it begins with helping them to understand the impacts that happen when we aren't engaged in what's going on. The other part of it, we just got to make sure that young people are helping to design how we invite folks in, how we honor folks, how we get the work done. You look at organizations like Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelk's organization. She's a co-founder of Wawa in Atlanta. When I have gone down there, we've done water quality testing, a number of different things, but it's because young people not only understand the impacts that are happening in their communities, but they are the ones that are designing how we flow and how we get down. So, and you see that across the country. I can talk to you afterwards about a number of different organizations. I remember I used to put events on. Sometimes we'd have 800, 900 young people who would come out because we made sure that it was entertaining, but we also made sure that folks understood that they can make change in their community and also that they can create their own sets of opportunities, whether it's working for an organization, creating their own organization, or different ways that they want to get at it. So, there's no one size fits all, but we can make it happen, and there are examples to show how it happens.
Yeah, I just was saying this is because the closing, I'm going to use your question for a closing. I think that it's a great question to kind of be wrapped into. We need to be a movement that obviously doesn't use anybody. We can't do a rally and ask young people to show up and they don't have bus fare to get back to their homes. We can't be a rally that asks frontline and fence line communities to fly into D.C. to stand on the stage, but then those same families can't pay their rent or their health care bill because they got cancer. We can't be a movement that's asking for folk to be honest, work for free in many cases when we getting paid and we doing well. There has to be some level of shared discomfort and shared love. I will tell you this, the one thing that I think our movement this was about culture and storytelling and money. The one thing that our movement didn't do well at is around a movement of compassion. When Hurricane Helene hit, I remember thinking and hearing so many groups about this is the 1,000-year type hurricane, and see, like Asheville, North Carolina should have been. We never thought they would be hit, and we talked about that while we didn't get into those communities. I remember when the train derailment hit in East Palestine, Ohio, how when the vinyl chloride spilled and those communities were going through, and I can say this now, I remember going to the last administration and telling them, you need to go to East Palestine, Ohio. But because those were predominantly white people who were in MAGA hats, for some reason we lost our humanity. We was picking sides. We don't win that way. When I went to East Palestine, Ohio, I was never hugged by so many white people in my life. They was like, man, so happy that somebody sharing the pain. We win as a movement with compassion, not as a movement that's saying, I know it's hard, but we gotta break that. So for young people who want to be in this movement, we have compassion, and we want to support them, and we have people in this movement, we're going to change how we work. And I think that this year marks the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And I say that because every single year, Hip Hop Caucus, and please Hip Hop Caucus to check it out, every single year we've done a Katrina anniversary commemoration. And some years it's bigger than others, this will be big, but years 13 and 19 and 16 wasn't so big, but we was there. I just ask our movement to have compassion for those who are in the movement, and our movement to show up when the cameras are not there. People still don't have their homes in Hurricane Helene and Milton, the wildfires in LA. We while they want to move to the next thing, we can't. I'm telling you, if we begin to show love and compassion, we win.
Environmental justice. Yes, give Reverend Rahman. We're going to close out now. I just want to remind folks that environmental justice is about love, and it's about passion, and it's about power. And I'm going to do this before, as Rev is about to leave. I want everybody to look to the person to your left. If you don't know your left, have your neighbor help you out. Everybody look to the person to your right. Put your left hand out to the person on your left-hand side. Help your neighbor. I see some folks struggling. Right hand out to the person on your right-hand side. If you got your hand sanitizer. All right, I'm going to ask everybody to stand if you can. We're going to see how talented this room actually is. Let's give Rev a shout out as he walks out. And the rest of the Hip Hop Caucus as well. I see them. All right, we love you. I started off by saying that my grandmother says that you have power unless you give it away. Dr. King once said that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. And we see that in so many different aspects of our lives. But we have to also remember that no matter what comes our way, that we have power. And often people don't actually believe that they have power. Let me see the folks that we got in the room today, if they believe that they have power. Everybody say power. That was just a little bit better than anemic. Let's try it again. Everybody say power. Power. And this time say power to the people. Power to the people. Say power to the people. Power to the people. And since I still believe in the power of the Trinity, one last time say power to the people. Power to the people. For Rev and myself, we want to thank you for everything that you do. We want to thank the conference for continuing to be amazing. And we'll see you out there on the front lines.
All right, y'all. I can't think of a better way to close our third day. Thank you to Reverend Yearwood, the Hip Hop Caucus, Dr. Mustafa Ali. I say closing the third day because we not over. We've been sitting at our desks, computers, in this Silver Spring Civic Building, talking about taking nature black. But tomorrow we get to go be in community out in nature, which is what this is all about, is reconnecting to our roots, our indigenous practices. So if you haven't signed up, go sign up. We are at the Patuxent Research Refuge, Lake Artemisia. Thank you, DZ Bird Alliance and Dante Jackson. And we have moved. We were having a walk at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. There seems to be some accessibility issues. So Soul Track Outdoors is now moving to the National Arboretum. But you know what? I just heard there's a nesting pair of bald eagles who are expecting an eaglet. So, I mean, sign up and still go. And if you don't want to get out of bed, we have virtual yoga. So please sign up.
Yes, we want to say thank you to all of our sponsors, speakers, and vendors. We could not have done this without you. We would love to say thank you to SELC, as well as the Keith Campbell Foundation for all of your support of Taking Nature Black 2025 Reclamation Resilience. Thank you to our conference planning committee, and thank you to Nature Forward staff for your hours of dedicated time to making this space possible. Yes, please give them a round of applause. Thank you to each and every one of you for thugging it out with us to the end of the day, to showing up for yourselves, and thank you for sharing space with us.
So we have another announcement, which we do at the end of every conference. So this Taking Nature Black happens every other year. So next year, we have our Naturally Latinos Conference. And we got some co-chairs to introduce to you for the Naturally Latinos Conference. Allie and Gina, please stand. Please stand, Gina. All right. Where's Allie? Allie, coming right through the door, right there. Don't be shy, coming all the way. All right. They will be your amazing MCs and conference planners for next year. And then thank you, everyone, for making this so special. Despite everything that's happened in this world, we find space for joy, renewal, and finding that space is imperative. It's how we reclaim ourselves, and it's how we stay resilient in our work. I think that was the theme of our conference.
Absolutely. When Lydia and I first started planning this conference a year ago, we had a wish list, I would say, of what we wanted it to be, what people we wanted to be involved, how we wanted it to look. And we can say that our wish list came to fruition. We didn't have to go to Plan B or the second plan, and I firmly believe that that was well intended for what we needed, what we all needed today. So keep walking in alignment. Do whatever you need to do to stay connected to your higher power. For me, it's God, and I thank him for blessing me with this opportunity to be here, to stand before you, to stand in community with you, to continue to do this work. And I thank you, Lydia, for being a wonderful co-chair. Lydia is really my supervisor in my in my role with Nature Forward, but we have been able to grow with each other. She's been able to help me to develop professionally. And this has just been something so natural for me to be able to come into this and organize. And I thank you for being the best partner to do this work and to come here and do this.
Second to you. Hire Jamoni for all your event planning. Oh. She thinks of all the details. It's just so beautiful when you both have something in your heart and you get to see it come together, true collaboration. So, anyone feeling on fire? So, I need each and every one of you to take this feeling, this fire, all of it that's in your hearts right now, and commit to, once you leave this room, to go transform the world into one that centers nature, justice, and freedom. Thank you for joining us for Taking Nature Black 2025.